Calvin Phillips is set for a medical at West Ham after a loan deal agreed with Manchester City. Oh yes, good evening. Welcome along to Sky Sports News, the transfer show, as West Ham win the race to sign the England midfielder. The deal could go beyond this season as well. Now, we've also got news on Karim Benzema, plus Tottenham, Aston Villa and Everton. Taking us through it all, Michael Bridge and Rob Dorset this evening. And as Newcastle look to raise funds, will Miguel Almiron be the first one out of the door? We have the latest. And the final round of games in Group C of the Africa Cup of Nations are just about to begin. Gambia against the indomitable Lions of Cameroon, who must win to have any chance of qualification. That's on Sky Sports Football. And Guinea's national elephants take on the holders Senegal. That's on Sky Sports Premier League and Sky Sports main event. So, from the national elephants to what was the elephant in the room, Calvin Phillips. But there have been developments. And, Michael, tell us about the deal.
Yeah, and it's good news potentially for West Ham, Mike. They've reached agreement with Manchester City for the loan of Calvin Phillips. So we also understand there's an option to join the club on a permanent deal next season. Now, but it's good news for West Ham because we know about the teams we mentioned. There was a lot of interest, maybe a little bit of surprise it's taken this long. Look, we know Calvin Phillips has been pretty happy with how things are. He's not been itching to leave, but with talk from Pep Guardiola, he's even said himself that he needs to move on. He feels terrible for him. It looks like it's close. Potential medical in the next 48 hours. Flying back from their warm weather training camp in Abu Dhabi. So this looks now to be moving at a rapid pace to the London Stadium.
The only thing I'd say is, sorry to pour cold water on that for West Ham fans, but we told you last week that there were 5 other clubs interested in Calvin Phillips. Juventus, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, Newcastle, Palace and West Ham, right? What are those other 5 clubs doing? Just because West Ham have agreed a deal, a loan deal for Calvin Phillips, doesn't mean he's going to go there. That player in your screen there still has an awful lot to say on where he goes, and I think the ball is now in the court of those 5 other clubs to see how they respond. West Ham have stolen a march on them. They're interested in Calvin Phillips. I've been talking to Tim Thornton, who's been right across this story, one of our senior reporters, knows Calvin Phillips very well, knows his people, and he's made it very clear to me that the interest West Ham have had in David Moyes in Calvin Phillips is long-standing. Even before he left Leeds, they made inquiries about getting him. So the relationship between David Moyes and that man is long-standing in terms of him knowing about West Ham and David Moyes' respect and how impressed they are by him. But it's not done yet. As I understand it, he's still flying over from Abu Dhabi, where he's been with Manchester City. Medical, we can't get that tied down. Doesn't seem as though it's imminent in the next 24 hours. Is it going to be sometime in the next few days? What does Calvin Phillips want? We haven't heard from him. Where he wants to go could have a big say. How those other 5 clubs respond could be vital as well.
Michael, that's a great point. I was going to hit you with this. Given the calibre of the other clubs, particularly those in Europe, is it a surprise that at the moment West Ham are leading the race?
Well, look, what I said at the start as well was that it doesn't seem that he's in a massive rush. It's not as if he's lost his England place. We know how much Gareth Southgate loves Calvin Phillips. He has to make a decision. He seems happy. Even when he lifted the Club World Cup trophy, when he hardly had any minutes, he's still happy. I know people say, well, he's not going to look like Victor Meldrew, is he, on a TV screen? But even so, it looks like he's always happy. He's part of the squad. But what we do know is Pep Guardiola himself said, I'm very, very sorry. It's just not going to happen. What we also know is Roy Hodgson has come out and said, we'd love to have him. He'd get plenty of minutes here. We also know Newcastle United's situation. We do know that clubs in Europe don't have a lot of cash. So what we will find out over the next few days is potentially what Manchester City have asked for. We know that it was a significant loan fee, and we know the situation in football clubs at the moment. But what, as Rob says, we do know is West Ham are ahead. And what can they offer him? European football. I know it's been a tough few weeks for West Ham United, but what David Moyes has done at West Ham United, they're not only just won a European trophy, they're Europa League regulars at the moment. They will be in the knockout stages, so he will play plenty of games. You speak to West Ham United fans, I like the look of their midfield. They sold their best midfielder, but look at it at the moment, it's looking pretty strong. So, he has got a lot to think about, but for him, I think it's a positive evening for him.
Yeah, but Rob, he has to get in the England squad, which means he's got to play football. if this move to West Ham does happen, does that increase his chances?
Hugely, hugely. I mean, look, Gareth Southgate has been playing him, even when he's not been playing for Manchester City. You've had this crazy situation where the England manager has been giving that man on your screen there game time in international football when he can't get game time for his club, to try and get his fitness levels up, to try and keep him within the England setup. That's how highly he is thought of by Gareth Southgate. Gareth Southgate will be absolutely delighted if Calvin Phillips gets a move in this window, and he'll be delighted if it's somewhere like West Ham where he's going to get a decent amount of game time. Add to that the fact that Jordan Henderson, by the way, has just got his move to Ajax, where he's going to play regular football at, well, perhaps not the strongest league in Europe, but at a much better standard than he was playing in Saudi Arabia. That's competition for Calvin Phillips. Calvin Phillips will have noticed that and go, hang on, I'm competing with Henderson for a place in that England squad. If I don't get in games, can Gareth Southgate justify taking me? So he knows he needs a move. I mean, from what Tim Thornton's telling me, he and Manchester City want this sorted pretty quickly now, this week. They don't want this dragging into the final week of the transfer window next week. So things could move pretty quickly. I'm just saying, don't put your house on it. Don't stake your house that it's West Ham, because there are some very, very big clubs that, other than West Ham, that are interested in Calvin Phillips.
Michael, Rob said something interesting there. He said if he goes to West Ham, he'll get lots of minutes. Will he? Because that West Ham midfield looks pretty good to me.
Well, what West Ham and David Moyes did after Declan Rice's departure, albeit it took a few weeks afterwards, they recruited very well, particularly in midfield. Kudus, who might be coming back a little bit early from African Cup of Nations because of Ghana going up. You've got Bowen up front now. You've got Paquetá. But you've got him alongside Alvarez. You've got James Ward-Prowse, Thomas Souček. But he would have spoken to David Moyes. I'm sure, well, he will end up speaking to David Moyes about his place in the side. They're out of the domestic trophies, but as I've said, they are in Europe. He's got decisions to make. As Rob says, it's not done yet, and West Ham are in front.
All right. Let's turn our attention to Newcastle then. And Rob, a development in the last half an hour or so.
Concerning another England man, Kieran Trippier. Now, we've been telling you for the last couple of days that Bayern Munich are interested in him, that they wanted a loan deal for Kieran Trippier, but it was pretty clear that Newcastle weren't that keen on that idea unless it had an obligation to buy, because we know that Newcastle are sailing quite close to the wind in terms of P&R, profitability and sustainability. They have absolutely no desire to sell that man in the middle of your screen there. But Florian Pettenberg, one of our colleagues at Sky Germany, has just tweeted to say that Bayern are now pushing hard for a substantive move, not for a loan deal, for a substantive move. The idea of this loan deal with an obligation to buy is out of the window. Trippier, he thinks, is open to the idea of talking to the German giants, although he is happy on Tyneside as well. So where does that leave them? The way I see this one is, I think it would be absolutely extraordinary if Newcastle let their club captain, their most talismanic signing since they came into the Premier League with their new owners, leave for perhaps 11 or 12 million pounds. All right, he's 33 years old, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. He is the leader of that football club. He's probably the most important signing. If you talk to Newcastle fans, they'll tell you Trippier was the man who changed it all, set the standards off the field, brought the standards on the field, led the squad. You let that go, you can't replace him for 12 million quid, even if he is 33. So I think that's still a long shot. And how much are Bayern prepared to pay for him when they've got interest elsewhere in other fullbacks? We've been told that they're pushing to sign the 26-year-old Nordi Mukiele on loan from Paris Saint-Germain as well. How much are they going to Trippier before talking to Paris Saint-Germain? So I think that's an interesting one as well. But Pettenberg's new information here that we know that Bayern want a substantive deal rather than a loan deal. That is what Newcastle want as well, if they're prepared to let that man go. But I'd be staggered if they let him go.
All right, so if it isn't Trippier who goes, is it Almiron who's first out the door?
Well, Michael and I have been talking about this, and yeah, Keith Downey, our man up in the North East, says that it is most likely that Almiron leaves. Of the three that we're discussing, and don't forget, Kieran Trippier, Callum Wilson and Miguel Almiron are the three that are being touted with interest from elsewhere. There has been an interest in Almiron from Saudi Arabia, both in the summer and again in this January window. I've been told that a number of Saudi clubs are interested in him, with Al Shabab one that's particularly keen on him. And you've got the likes of Belgian international Yannick Carrasco there. So the standard of players that he'd be going to go with are pretty high. But I think this is the crucial factor from Newcastle's perspective. Saudi Arabia is probably one of the only countries that can afford to pay the sort of money that it would take to get him away from Newcastle. £30 million, potentially. Newcastle don't want to sell him. Again, they'd have to look to replace him. But I think Eddie Howe is very realistic here. He would like to bring a midfielder in as of his own. He knows that the finances are very, very tight. He may have to lose somebody he doesn't want to lose if he's to bring the people in that he wants. And of the three, Trippier, Wilson and Almiron, that man looks the most likely to leave.
Michael, Rob just touched on it there. What sort of look is it for Newcastle to sell the man who started the revolution at the Toon?
It might be the story of January, the richest club in football having to sell. But that's where we are. This is what we've been saying nearly every day in the situation, PSR. It's spooked clubs. It's got teeth. We know this. Now, clubs will now be looking at this and saying, you know what, we're all right for now. We'll reconvene in the summer. We'll have a meeting in March, April. And look, Eddie Howe might even just be sitting down now and thinking, look, the only issue I'd say maybe is Joe Linton's injury, and his contract situation. That could be a big issue for Newcastle. One of the best signings, the pre-Eddie Howe era. So this one's clearly got legs. And what we do know is, as Rob said, it's not a good look in terms of Trippier. What a great signing he's been. He was. He's top of nearly all the stats. Assists, chances created. It would be a huge loss to Newcastle United.
Yeah, indeed. All right, so there's a possibility that Almiron could be on his way to the Saudi Pro League, but we've seen other players want to get out of there. Jordan Henderson, we now know has gone, and the news agency AFP is now reporting that Karim Benzema has asked Al Ittihad if he can leave temporarily. Rob, can you see Benzema in the Premier League?
I think there's a lot of Premier League supporters and a lot of Premier League clubs who would like to see it. I mean, look, we've seen Manchester United and Spurs as two cases in point where they've liked these huge strikers with big reputations that they can get towards the back end of their careers, maybe. But can they afford Benzema? And you're talking about huge wages here again. He's coming from Saudi, if he does come at all. Huge salary he's receiving over there. We talked a little bit about the financial reality for Premier League clubs and PSR at the moment. I'm told by the people I'm talking to this is a very difficult market. January's always difficult, but I'm told this is about as difficult as they've ever known. The mid to lower bottom half Premier League clubs are not looking to spend in this window. They know that the rules are going to change, probably in August. So for the next transfer window, the chances are the Premier League might have changed the rules so that you can lose more than £105 million over 3 seasons. We don't know. There's got to be a vote on it. But they're expecting that to happen because they sense the feeling amongst other Premier League teams. So if the rules are about to change, why don't you keep your powder dry? Why don't you keep your money available? Why do you spend big when you're up to the wire in terms of PSNR? And that's going to change. Those rules are going to change. So all that I'm told is we're expecting not an awful lot to happen. And a lot of Premier League clubs are looking at Forest and Everton, who may get further points deductions. They're looking at Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United, who are struggling at the bottom end of the table. And so probably there isn't a clamour from the lower end of the table to think we need to spend money to survive. Maybe that's a bit of a unique season. It doesn't normally happen at this stage. So I don't want to poo-poo the last week or so of the window, the last 9 days of it. But from what I'm hearing, the chances of people spending big on the likes of some stellar names like Benzema pretty slim, even though there's a lot of clubs in the Premier League that would like to have him.
OK, let's try and ignore what Rob just said in the last 30 seconds. Tottenham Hotspur, they have been busy. They've done, people will say really good business. Will they go again, Michael?
Well, the talks are continuing with Club Bruges over the potential signing of Antonio Nusa. Now, this is someone who's really excited. He's been scouted by all the top teams. I think, ideally, it's something if Tottenham can get it done. One of the prime reasons are that the top clubs, if he's still at Club Bruges come the summer without any future transfer to Tottenham or another club, most clubs will be in for him. So the idea, if they were successful, talks are still talks at the moment, but it would be a loan back to that club because it's worked for Tottenham. Destiny Udogie went back to Udinese. Pape Sarr went back to Metz. They are now established Premier League players, right in Ange Postecoglou's first team. It's been a real success. I think Spurs will also say they've had a great window. I'll say so far. Let's keep it exciting as well, But, I mean, Hugo Lloris, their club captain, off the wage bill. Eric Dyer, Bayern Munich, great move for him, off the wage bill. Ivan Perisic, off the wage bill. Jed Spence, not wanted, Genoa, off you go. Sergei Reguilon, not wanted, off to Brentford. They've had a good window. Is it over? Never say never with Tottenham, but they're very happy at the moment.
All right, never say never. So I'm gathering there's a player attracting interest from Saudi, is that right?
Emerson Royal was a player attracting interest, but I understand that Tottenham do not want to sell. And also he's very happy as a young family. He's loving London. He's very close with a lot of the players, particularly Richarlison. But I think you've got to take into account the young family situation with these footballers as well. It's a big move, Saudi Arabia. And look, players talk. And if there's a little bit of discontent with 1 or 2 players at the moment. But look, I think the key here as well is Tottenham do not want to sell him.
OK, all right, time for a break. When we come back, news of the cavalry arriving at Sheffield United to try and keep them up. Plus, could Unai Emery's Villa strengthen before next Thursday's deadline? They might. Much more coming next in a moment. Yeah, breaking news and update on Kieran Trippier. Michael Bridge.
Yes, the player we were talking about before the break, Kieran Trippier. We've now got confirmation from our colleagues Pete Graves and Keith Downer that Newcastle United have rejected an improved offer for Trippier from Bayern Munich. We're told the club's position has not changed and Trippier is not for sale. We've been told the bid was in the region of 13 million. So as Rob was saying in the last part, 13 million, not enough for Kieran Trippier, for someone who they deem such a key player.
I think the really interesting thing, Mike, is that we said you can't replace him for 13 million quid, so absolutely no surprise at all that Newcastle have rejected that for a player who's so important for them. But how much more are Bayern Munich prepared to pay? He's 33 years old. He's got 18 months left on his contract. I can't see them going that much higher when they've got other options that they think they can go for. So I just can't see it happening. I can't see that man leaving Newcastle for Bayern Munich. He's open to talking to them, we understand. Of course he is. They're one of the giants in Europe. But he's happy on Tyneside. He's absolutely vital to Eddie Howe's plans. OK, all right, we'll keep an eye on that one. Let's get to the latest now on the Brazil international midfielder Andre, who is reportedly a target for Fulham. But as the South American football expert Tim Vickery has explained, they won't be the only ones interested.
Well, there's competition because Atletico Madrid have now thrown their hats into the ring. And the idea that they've come up with is one of those kind of loans with an obligation to buy. 15 million euros up front and then 35 later on. One of these deals that have been structured to try and work their way around financial fair play. The Premier League did seem to be the destination for this player. But Atletico Madrid, Diego Simeone, if you're a young midfielder, you want to play for Diego Simeone. So suddenly competition has emerged.
Tim Vickery there. Now, what a night ahead for Middlesbrough. They are 90 minutes away from the Carabao Cup final, and they will be desperate to keep hold of Morgan Rogers. Rob, will they?
Well, they're fighting very hard to. I think what's been made very, very clear in the last few days is that Middlesbrough will not sell Morgan Rogers to Aston Villa on the cheap, what they consider to be on the cheap. And it's pretty clear that the two bids that they've rejected from Aston Villa so far are nowhere near what they have as their valuation for the player. Villa would like a winger. He fits their bill perfectly. He would fit into Unai Emery's side absolutely perfectly. I think the thing that could change here is Rogers himself. If he angles for a move, and why wouldn't he want to join Aston Villa, who are probably one of the most exciting clubs in the Premier League right now in terms of where they've been, where they're going, under the stewardship of Unai Emery. Real ambition at that football club. You can sense and expect him to be tempted by it. But Borough are holding all the cards here. He's under contract, and they will not sell him on the cheap. It's thought that he is particularly keen on a move to Villa Park and joining the Premier League. But Borough have become increasingly frustrated, is what we're being told, at the level of Villa's offers. And they won't welcome it on a night like tonight, that we're talking about it, just before he's about to play in one of the biggest games in the club's history.
And that's what I was going to say. Does a lot depend on what happens tonight? Because I think they're 11th, aren't they, in the Championship? So they're not pulling up any trees there. But they could win a cup for the first time in a long time. So does it depend on if they get past Chelsea?
I don't think so. Look, Middlesbrough aren't that far outside the playoff places, and they would see Morgan Rogers as a key player for them to get into those playoff places. They're thinking about the Premier League. Yes, tonight what's happening in terms of the EFL Cup semi-final is huge for them. It would be difficult for Rogers to walk away if they are in a big final at Wembley, wouldn't it? But I don't think that's crucial. I think there's bigger stuff at stake here. I don't know what you think, Michael.
No, I agree. I mean, look, personally, I had Middlesbrough to go up under Michael Carrick at the start of the season, but we know how hard the Championship is. But Aston Villa are a real force under Unai Emery, so I don't think even if Middlesbrough were to go through tonight, it would have too much influence on it.
All right, a couple of quick lines coming out of Sheffield United. Michael, what's going on there?
We're talking about clubs who probably aren't going to do much. I don't think that's the case with Sheffield United. And Chris Wilder's always good with us at press conferences, always open. We know they want a defender. There's Chris Wilder there. He's smiling. They actually got a draw that night, didn't they, at Sheffield, Aston Villa? They're interested in Joe Worrell from Nottingham Forest. There's also interest in Mason Holgate, who's currently on loan at Southampton, and Ben Godfrey. So we do know they want a defender. They also want a goalkeeper, Ivo Grbic, flying into the UK today to undergo a medical with Chris Wilder's side. The Croatian international was on the bench for Atletico Madrid against Granada last night. So there looks to be movement for Sheffield United.
I say this every time we do a transfer show, running out of time. So I want you to whiz through this for me, guys. Rob, Hull. Been busy. Are they going to go again?
Spending big money, aren't they? I mean, look, their new owners are really having a go, you have to say. And I've been told that they're close to agreeing a deal with Luton for the left-sided utility man Ryan Giles. The deal, as I understand it, would be an initial loan for the remainder of the season. But discussions are ongoing about whether there'd be an option for Hull to buy him or an obligation to buy him if he plays a certain number of games in the Championship. And this puts it into context. We're talking about some of the Premier League clubs being absolutely broken on their knees and worried about profit and sustainability rules. Hull, potentially, I'm told, the fee could be as high as £5 million for Ryan Giles in that deal if it is have a substantive option on it. Hull's ambitions are clear. Liam Rossini's side just a point outside the Championship. Fabio Cavallo, they've already spent big money on. He scored the winner against Sunderland, one of their rivals. If they get this guy as well, Ryan Giles, it's a real show of ambition from them.
Michael, quick line on Rangers.
Yeah, closing on the signing of FC Norwich midfielder Mohamed Diomande. A source has told us the clubs are at advanced stages of negotiations. We know, Rangers fans, you're a bit worried because of all the movement you had in the summer. You are bringing players in. We're going to tell you more about that at 7 o'clock on the transfer show, because this is big news for Rangers.
We absolutely will. Rob, very quickly, 10 seconds. Emmanuel Dennis, is he on his way back to Watford?
Yes, looks like he very much is. I'm told that deal is nearly done. Bear in mind he signed for £15 million for Forest. They brought him back from his loan in Turkey, where he's there, and he's likely to join Watford in the next 24 hours or so. Back on loan from Forest.
Fabulous. That's us now. Michael, when are we back?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock with Michael and Rob. Transfer show. Sky Sports News next.